I'm Coy Jandreau here at Golden Apple Comics in the heart of Hollywood with Kevin Smith himself.
Oh my God, that's striking. Look at what I could do with a camera. You or me when I was like happy.
Anyone that knows this man's work knows the best place to be with him is in a comic book store. I am so excited. We're about to do some sweet comic book shopping. You ready?
I'm ready to spend.
Let's do this. All right, we are in Hollow Grounds. We are at a comic book store, and I've heard a rumor for years that you had to sell many of your comics to make Clerks. Is there anything you're still hunting down? Did you get them all back?
No, it was really liberating when I sold the collection. That's going back to like 1993 is when I finally got rid of it. I didn't sell it for cash. I sold it to a place called Comics Plus, our local comic book store in Middletown, New Jersey, for store credit, $2,000 in store credit. So the collection was valued using an Overstreet guide, which tended to be high back in the day, was valued at like $12,000. I couldn't sell it. All I could get was $2,000 store credit. And then that store credit, I sold off to my friend Walter Flanagan, the guy from Comic Book Men. So he would buy, say, $200 worth of comics, and then he'd give me $150. So my value even went down. Selling the collection enabled me to make Clerks, and that opened up the door to the world, for heaven's sake. So everything I got to do was because of that first kind of big sacrifice. So I'll never regret letting it go.
All right, we're gonna look at some more comics.
Let's.
So growing up in comic book culture, I see you've given yourself a trench coat at work and a coat in day-to-day life. Did you intentionally give yourself a cape?
You know, honestly, that's less comic books and more Sam Kinison is where the trench coat came from. And also, I was heavy set, so I saw like Sam Kinison's a heavy set guy, he's wearing a trench coat and it hides most of the heavy set. It's like a fat guy's moo-moo. So I moved towards trench coats for that reason. But then later on, when we did like Mallrats and like Silent Bob's got the Batman helmet, suddenly the long coat became like a cape and you're like, oh, this is kind of superhero-ish. And then when The Matrix came out, you're like,
this is just cool.
It is, yeah, it's better than a cape.
Now, with Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, that Terry Dodson-esque heist scene, for me, that just read like a Terry Dodson animatic. Do you put comic flavor in your movies from a visual standpoint or verbal standpoint? How do you see the frame?
I don't. I really don't ever see the frame. Thank God I got a DP. I prefer things very simple, which I guess honestly, when you look at the dynamic comic book page, like an artist can take 6 panels and turn it into something that comes alive, springs off the page. I don't tend to direct like a comic book, I tend to direct like a comic strip. My composition is very much that same way. I'm more interested in what the characters have to say than like, look at what I could do with a camera. And I've definitely made a few movies where I've showed off with the camera and stuff, but that's not my forte. I'm more of a dialogue person than a visuals person.
Podcasts are becoming this insane market, and I consider like you, Rogan, and Maron kind of like the Mount Rushmore. Oh, yeah. What is it that calls to you about podcasts? With your love of dialogue, did you feel like that was a natural transition from film?
Honestly, the thing I loved about podcasting was like I could have my own radio show and nobody will stop me. I love the notion of like I can just say whatever I want. It's so no stress, no mess. And at the end of the day, I'm a storyteller first and foremost. And so there are a bunch of different ways to tell you a story. And the first way I tried was film, and that's what started my reputation. But if podcasting had existed back in like when I saw Slacker in 1991, I would have recorded a podcast about you have to go see this movie. It's amazing. I would have been an advocacy journalism guy. People love to hear, you know, negativity, but I go the other way. I'm like, if I'm on a podcast, I'm telling you about something I saw that I love. There's so much content to wade through just to ingest. Who has time to ingest it and then be like, I hated it? like put it down and go find the next thing and then talk about that.
We're seeing this zeitgeist shift actually right now. Like, we have Phase 3 ending at Marvel, Phase 4 feels like this whole new animal, and then DC is doing these Elseworlds. Yes. But I never thought we'd get Howard the Duck, man. I never thought we'd get a world where He-Man could be like, you've had your toe in it, but now you're like splashing in the waters.
It's crazy. I remember like when Masters of the Universe began, my parents were like, no. we're not buying these toys. We bought Star Wars. You're not jumping into anything new. But I remember like some of my friends being like, I watch that crap, man. Why are you wasting your time? And like now, a couple decades later, I'm like, well, that was why. You know, because I'll take it. Like I can't draw for shit. If I could, I wouldn't have made all those terrible movies and stuff. But I can write, and so I can write something and hand it over to the great artists at Powerhouse and be like, bring this to life. In Masters of the Universe, I could take you someplace new. It's more traditional storytelling. It's like you're on an adventure story. Howard allows you to break the barriers, like comment on the medium.
Yeah.
Like really kind of, and I'm not saying like this is what we're going for, but you can kind of into the Spider-Verse it a lot.
He had a lot more Deadpool before Deadpool did, and people don't give him that credit. Like, it definitely makes sense.
My father bought me my first copy of Howard the Duck.
Yeah.
And so he knew I love comics, and he went and bought one because he goes, this is funny. He's going, I know you like the superheroes, but I saw on the news that this was actually funny. That DNA is in my DNA. So then years later, when they're like, hey, do you want to do the cartoon over at Marvel? I'm like, oh my Lord, yes. Now you still buy on a weekly basis. I own a comic book store in New Jersey, but I don't read on a weekly basis anymore. You have maintained
every Wednesday. I'm a weekly warrior. I'm a Wednesday warrior.
You were me when I was like happy. What would you suggest for a new reader?
I would say for getting back in after a time away, we've got Tom King on Batman. I'm sure you've heard about it.
Yes.
He's won many Eisners, and he's an ex-CIA op who now is using those. He was in the CIA, and now he's using that knowledge to make Batman as badass as you'd expect a CIA.
Serious? I didn't know that part. He's on Batman right now?
He's on Batman.
He's also doing like Mr. Miracle?
Yeah, dude, his Mr. Miracle. I think Mr. Miracle is, next to Saga, the single most important comic of the last 10 years. He's an escape artist that can't escape his own life. So he's suicidal, and the escape he wants is from life. So it starts off nice and fluffy. Then it's
like
just
a fun comic
it's
book.
This Is Us meets Looney Tunes. It's Jack Kirby's Looney Tunes sensibilities with This Is Us's dark roundedness, so that the balance is art, and it's one of the best. It's Mr. Miracle. I am in deep love with Batman Superman. It is Josh Williamson who's been killing it on Flash, but what really gets me is the art. Marquez I did not know until recently, but
oh my
look,
God, that's striking.
Like he just draws exactly like you right?
He's got very realistic expressions, but that's a comic book expression.
Like that's
right
a full
there.
Ringo,
Yeah.
but this is full like the dots and bodies hype. Have you heard about House of X and Powers of 10? Basically, Jonathan Hickman is one of those guys that has to have charts and graphs in his books so you understand them.
This looks like a Chris Claremont level of dialogue.
It's dense, it's scientific, it's brilliant, and you have to chart it. And he's reinventing the X-Men. They're restarting X-Men continuity. X-Men canon is ending and starting here. This is the biggest X book probably since, I wouldn't say since Claremont, but since Joss is Astonishing. It's huge.
Wow.
We've got Savage Avengers, which is a new book. Gary Duggan has assembled Conan the Barbarian, Punisher, Elektra, and Venom with Brother Voodoo.
Oh, Lord.
And the art is Mike Deodato.
God, that's like it almost looks like a Marvel Knights combo.
Like imagine if we'd seen this in the 90s. Like this team I never thought we'd get. Tom Taylor is at Marvel and DC, and he's writing Spider-Man Truly Friendly Neighborhood. This is Spider-Man waiting in line at fast food, ordering stuff to bring back to MJ and get her right bagels, and he forgot her bagels. It's that kind of Spider-Man from the 60s detail that I miss. And then while we're living with Spider-Man, because I gotta plug this book, Chip Zdarsky wrote a book that I didn't think on paper could work. This is Spider-Man if he aged in real time. So he's actually 15 and 63, and he's actually in his 70s and 2000s. They introduce Ben Reilly, they introduce
oh my
Miles.
Lord, look how old everybody is.
And it's Mark Bagley drawing old villains. You've written some of my favorite comics. I have to talk to you about your world, so let's dive into that.
Okay.
So Reboot's coming out
Yeah.
very soon.
Very.
This is a movie I've been twitching for like a decade. Do we find out what happens in Good Will Hunting 2 hunting season?
No, and there was close. There was a moment where we were going to use Matt as Matt Damon in the movie because we did that in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and it was going to reference Good Will Hunting 2. But my wife was just like, how come you never think about using Matt as Loki from Dogma? And I was like, because he died in the movie. She's like, it's a movie. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. He's an angel. We can do anything we want. It was dream runs for me, man. Like, because of the movies, Mallrats and Chasing Amy was steeped in comic book culture. It was about an inker and a penciler. And
Not
in
a
the world
tracer.
of indie comics, not a tracer. I kind of got welcomed into the comic book world. So I got to work on like iconic runs of iconic characters at two of the big companies because
Yeah.
in Mallrats, because Brody was such a comic book fan. I loved comic books.
Yeah.
And the chance to write one, like I never thought I'd have that. Long before I wanted to get into film, I wanted to get into comics, but I didn't think they'd have me because all the writers were British and I was from New Jersey. I started pitching myself, like Joe and Jimmy brought me in on Daredevil because I'd met them when we were doing the opening credits for Mallrats. They did the Jay and Bob artwork and stuff. At DC, I was working on the Superman script at Warner Brothers at one point, so I was like, can I go to DC Comics? And so they toured me through, and I was going, there was a guy named Darren Vincenzo who was the editor on Green Arrow, and I remember popping my head in his office going, hey man, you don't know me, my name's Kevin Smith, but I guarantee if you give me a chance to write Green Arrow, I can make it a top 10 book. So he looked at me like, you asshole. And then a year later, called me up. He's like, didn't you come into my office one day and talk about Green Arrow? I said, yes, I would love to do it.
Well, you now have that with your universe. You've made the comic of your universe, so we were wondering if you would sign these. We're going to give it out to a viewer of this show, because if you're watching this, you love comics and you love this man, so would you mind?
I would love to.
We'll get that done. And I talk about this
Look
all
at
the
how
time.
big Saga is, man.
54 issues. That's 7 years of comics, but I wanted you to get that in your hands.
You could kill somebody.
Oh, that's a bludgeon, and it's some curls. We're going to check you out.
I know, right? I'm going to get some muscle tone.
So Saga is a book of dichotomies, and you will soon know why that cat's so important. There's a lying cat to your right, and that's going to change the game.
The Lion Cat.
I'm so excited for you to discover Saga.
Look, how long do you think it takes me to get through Saga?
Depending on how long your tour goes.
Yeah, it's true. This might be the tour read.
And you'll be coming back probably when hiatus ends and ready to dive in with the rest of us.
Well, reading these stories will cost you $136.12.
Well, I could do that. I love paying for
got
comic
it.
books. You know, you can write this off.
Oh, I know. That helped me. Do this thing.
Pleasure.
Hey, pleasure's all
Thank
mine,
you.
gentlemen.
Keep up the
Good
good
to
work.
see you again.
All right, let's check them out. This has been another episode of Comic Book Shopping. I am so excited to hear what you think of Mr. Miracle and Saga and so many of this month's books.
I'm delighted, man. It's been a while since anyone's given me recommendations, so I look forward to reading everything.
Now you're about to go on a crazy tour.
I am. That's why it's a good time to have a bunch of books, man. I'm going to be on the road for a while. Jay and Silent Bob Reboot Roadshow Tour. All across America. You get tickets at rebootroadshow.com. Or if you're like, I don't need to see it with you and Jay in person and do Q&A. I just want to see your dopey movie. October 15th, October 17th, Fathom Events having screenings at a theater near you. Go to fathomevents.com for information there.
Or I'm going to be at all of them. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Coy.
I would like to thank Golden Apple. I would like to thank, as always, Comic Books for existing. Thank you, guys.